Welcome back. As you know, I am Eli, the computer guy, and in today's class, we're going to be creating a very simple network and website up-down dashboard for you to see whether or not your server is able to see network or internet resources. So this can be a very useful thing in the troubleshooting or the help desk world. Many times, there will start to be problems with network devices or with websites before users realize there's a problem. So if you have a dashboard kind of sitting in the corner, and it's auto refreshing and you can see that there is an error, you may be able to fix the error before your users even realize something is going on. Or if you get a phone call, help desk, you get a phone call saying, oh, Salesforce is down, you can look over, you can look at your dashboard and go, oh, yep, Salesforce is down for us too. Let me go figure it out. So basically, the dashboard that we're going to be creating today is just a very simple thing. It is basically going to auto refresh. It is going to use the ping command in Linux to go out and ping different IP addresses or different websites, and it will then give you the results, and that will auto refresh for you within the dashboard that we'll be creating. So for the dashboard that we're going to be creating today, we're going to be using three tools in the HTML and PHP world. So the first tool that we're going to be using in HTML is you can actually set the metadata for your HTML website to auto refresh. So this is how we're going to get that dynamic component to this dashboard. What we're going to be doing today is we're going to be setting the web page to auto refresh itself every 5 seconds. So essentially every 5 seconds it'll refresh itself. When it refreshes itself, it will send out those ping commands, get those ping commands back, and then you'll be able to read them in the dashboard. So that's the first tool that we'll be using. The second tool that we'll be using is we'll actually be creating an array for the IP addresses or the websites that we want to ping, and then we will simply read through that array using the for each function in PHP. So instead of creating numerous different variables, having to remember all those variable names, basically getting a mess of code to ping all of these different websites, what we're going to do is we're going to create one single array. In that array, we're going to put all the IP addresses, all of the websites that we care about, and then we are going to use the for each function to then step through the array, step through all of those different IP addresses and domain names, and then run the shell_exec command to actually ping those different IP addresses or those domain names. Then in the for each function, the final tool that we're going to be using is a function called shell_exec. So what this allows you to do is this allows you to actually interact with the underlying operating system that your PHP code is running on. So in this case, it's a LAMP server, and actually be able to use the shell commands that are available to that operating system. So what we'll be using today is the ping command. So essentially what we're going to do is we're going to step through that array that we've created, and then we are going to ping each IP address or each domain name that is in the array. Now, one of the things that I will warn you about, with the shell_exec function is that you do not get a result from shell_exec until your command has completed, right? So if you send a trace route command using shell_exec, you might be waiting 30 seconds for something to show up on your web page, because basically what happens with shell_exec, it does the command. It's actually able to use the command on the operating system level, but then nothing comes back to you until there is a full result from the command. So if you do something like traceroute, again, it may take up to 30 seconds for the operating system to do the entire traceroute and send all of those results back to the shell_exec function. Why this can be a big problem when you start dealing with things in the ping world, right? You start doing different tools in Linux, is do remember that by default, ping does not stop in the Linux world. So if you're used to using ping in the Windows world, right? Ping in the Windows world, you do ping cnn.com or whatever else, it'll ping that website, it'll ping that IP address 4 times, and then it'll be over. That's not how it works in the Linux world. You say ping, and it'll just keep on pinging until you break out of it. So one of the things you do have to remember is whenever you're using the shell_exec function is you do have to make sure there's a breakpoint. You may have to make sure that you've coded in a breakpoint, because if you do something such as, ping, if you simply send the command, shell_exec and then essentially ping cnn.com, what's going to happen is your server is going to start pinging cnn.com, And it's literally going to keep pinging CNN.com forever until there's some kind of time, like massive timeout function, because you haven't given a breakpoint, and then you won't get any results back. So one of the things that we've done in this particular code is I'm pinging the websites or the IP address once. So basically, we're going to ping the website or IP address once, get the result back, and then we're going to print that out on the HTML page. And that's basically what we're going to be dealing with today. So with that, let's go over, take a look at the demonstration, show you actually what this dashboard looks like when it's finished, and then I will go and show you the code. Here we are back in my demonstration computer. For this particular demonstration, the computer really doesn't matter. All I need is a web browser of some sort that is able to access my web server and is able to access the PHP script that I've created. So I've created this script called shell exec ping array.php sitting at my server at 10.0.1.10, and this is the output. So this is the dashboard that we would be looking at. Now the first thing we have at the top, we just have a title, site status, and then one of the important things I would say is I have a timestamp here. This is very useful for you, especially in the initial build process, to verify that your code is actually auto-refreshing, actually doing what it's supposed to do. So one of the problems you can run into is sometimes you write code and it's supposed to auto-refresh, but for some reason it locks up. And one of the questions you have to ask yourself is, how would you know if your code locked up? How would you know if what you're seeing is actually current information or if it's information from an hour ago? By doing something such as simply putting a timestamp somewhere on the page, this is an easy way that you can see, okay, I know it's updating. Again, we can see here it's clicking along approximately every 5 seconds, so I know approximately every 5 seconds it is updating, so at least that part of the code is working. Some of the things you need to be thinking about when you're building your projects. Past that, we go down here, and essentially we have one IP address and a couple of different domain names that we are testing against. The web server is 10.0.1.10, and so its default gateway is 10.0.1.1. So it's pinging the default gateway. And again, I want you to see this here. So you could ping internal IP addresses. So you could ping particular servers on your network. You could ping the default gateway. Again, you don't have to just be pinging, Salesforce or Google or whatever else. So from that, basically, we can see that it's pinging. We see the IP address, obviously, because that is the IP address itself. Gives you some of that ping information. And then down here we can see one packet transmitted, one packet received, 0% loss, and it gives you some of those stats that most people don't really pay attention to anyway. So this gives you a little bit of information here. Again, we go down to something like Google. So since Google, we actually have to resolve that domain name to get the IP address. We can see we're pinging Google. The IP address we're getting for Google is 172.217.13.238. We can see a bit of, again, additional information, and we can know this is working. Salesforce, again, we see the IP address that we're pinging for Salesforce, so on and so forth. Facebook, again, we can see the IP address we're pinging for Facebook. And so we can have an idea of what the status is for these different sites. Again, you may run into issues. This might be a useful thing. So imagine instead of pinging google.com, you're pinging one of your own services on your network. So let's say, sales.elithecomputerguy.com. Let's say you have a CRM solution for your company. So you're pinging sales.elithecomputerguy.com. One of the things you might notice is the IP address here might be wrong. Somebody may have fat fingered the IP address in DNS, and so when your server tries to resolve to that CRM server, it's getting back the wrong IP address and it's failing. So again, this gives you a little bit of information. This is a very simple dashboard, but depending on what you're doing, it might be giving you enough information. So with that, let me go and let me just screw with something. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the IP address of our default gateway to show you what happens if the default gateway fails. So I'm going to hit save. Now it's going to auto refresh, and again, this might take a second because it has to fail out. Because that's one thing. Remember, you're not going to get a result from shell_exec until it actually fails out. So here it failed out. So all I did here, again, basically to simulate a failure, is I just changed the IP address from 10.0.1.1 to 10.0.1.21. So I have no server sitting at .21. We can see it pinged, and basically we can see 0% received, 100% packet loss. So this is what it looks like when it's good, and this is what it looks like when the ping fails for whatever reason. If I go back and I save it, we can then see in about 5 seconds, it will fix itself and we'll see that it is able to actually ping the IP address properly, right? So I reset the IP address how it's supposed to be, and this is what we get. Now, if for some reason the domain name doesn't resolve properly, so like the domain name doesn't exist in DNS, I'm going to mess with google.com. So instead of being google.com, I'm going to try to resolve to google.com. Right? So now we can see that nothing shows up there because there's no DNS resolution. If I put the period back in there, so actually give it the proper name. So all I did here is I removed the .com. So again, this is not a fully qualified domain name. We put it back to a fully qualified domain name, and it'll pop back up in about 5 seconds. So that is what this dashboard does. This is what the dashboard looks like. Not the most complicated thing in the world, but again, depending upon your situation, this might actually be useful for you. So with that, let's go over and actually take a look at the code. So here we are on my server. Again, I'm running Ubuntu 18.04 LTS. I am using the desktop edition just so we have a graphical user interface. Everything that I'm showing you today should basically work on any version, any distribution of Linux, and obviously you can run it simply at the command line. You don't need the full GUI. So here we have the code that I created today. So again, this is the script, shell exec ping array.php. I know, I'm horrible at these names. Someday I'll be good at naming things. Not yet. Anyway, so basically with this, what we have is we have a bit of an HTML page, and that is wrapping your PHP code in the middle. And so again, we're putting the PHP code within the HTML so we can have this auto refresh here. So you open up the HTML, you open up the head, and then within the head, you're going to be putting in metadata. So again, now in the modern world, a lot of times people don't think about metadata anymore. There used to be meta tags and all that kind of thing. That's kind of fallen out of fashion, but there is still some value out there for metadata. One of the values is, again, being able to auto refresh the page. So with this, all you do is you open up this tag meta, you do http:/equiv equals refresh. So you're saying what you want to do. We want to refresh, and then basically this is 5 seconds. So content equals every 5 seconds. So you could have it 5 seconds, you could have 60 seconds, you could have 600 seconds. So this is in seconds again. So if you wanted to be if you want to refresh every minute, then it would be 60. If you wanted to be refresh every 10 minutes, it would be 600. If you wanted to refresh every 60 minutes, 6 times 6, is that 360 or no? I don't know. You do the math. I'm a geek. I don't do math, but you get the point. This is in seconds. Then we're going to close the head. Then we're going to close the body. Then we're going to open up the PHP script. So this right here, this is the PHP that we're going to be dealing with. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to create an array for the websites. Again, so we don't have to create multiple different variables and then juggle a hell of a lot of different variables. We can simply create an array, and then we can add to or subtract from the array as we see fit. Right? So here we have this array, and if I wanted to do another website, like literally, I mean that right there is literally all I would need to do to add a different website. I don't have to create variables or anything else. Or if I want to get rid of a website, all I do is that. And now Facebook is gone. That's one of the valuable things of an array. You just put the values into the array, and then with the for each function, it will step through all of those values and run whatever code per value that you've set. Then we're going to go down here. Once we've done this, so websites equals array. Then you open up the parentheses, and then you do double quotation marks and all the values within the double quotation mark. Then you do a comma, then you do the next value within double quotation marks, then you do a comma, then you do the next value within double quotation marks. Close the parentheses, and then you do the semicolon. The next thing that we're going to do is we are going to simply echo the title for the page. So we're going to echo h1 site status, and then we're going to concatenate on a timestamp. So basically this is just the date function here, the time date function. So we do date, and then it's the hours, the minutes, the seconds. So it'll actually present the time in this fashion. Again, you can go and take a look at the date function and see the different ways you can show time. I'm just doing this. It shows you the hour, the minute, the second. Then we're going to concatenate on the end of the h1 tag. So this will all be in h1, and we have a nice little title and timestamp. Then we're going to go down, and the final bit of this is simply the for each function. So basically, we're going to use a for each function to step through the array. So for each, then we feed it the array websites, so the array for websites. And then we do as, so within this for each loop, within this for each function, each one of these values is going to be assigned to $URL. So we're now going to be interacting with $URL. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to create a command. So this command is going to be new for each value in the array. Every time it steps through the array, this command will be new. And so what we're going to do for the command is command equals, and then single quotation or double quotation mark, ping space hyphen C1. So what this is going to say is ping once. Ping once. Again, remember in the Linux world, if you don't set a limitation to the ping, it'll go on forever and bad things will happen. So we're going to do ping space hyphen C1. So we're going to say ping once, what we're about to give you. Then one of the things you have to remember is to do a little space here. So do a space before you do the double quotation mark. If you don't do a space, it's going to be one, and then it's just going to be one google.com or one salesforce.com. There's not going to be a space in between, so it's going to fail out. So ping space hyphen C space one space double quotation mark, then we concatenate on the URL. So the first time it goes through, it'll do ping space hyphen C space one space 10.0.1.1. The next time it goes through, it'll do ping space hyphen C space one space google.com, salesforce.com, so on and so forth. Then the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to create a smaller title. We're simply going to say echo strong, so in bold, the address that we're pinging for. So we go over, take a look at the demonstration again, just so it makes it a little bit easier to know what we're pinging. So this time we're pinging the default gateway, this time we're pinging Google, this time we're pinging Salesforce, so on and so forth. Again, just gives you a little bit of information for that end user. Then we're going to echo pre, so this is that pre-formatted. If you don't use the pre-tags with shell underscore exec, it will return the text values all essentially as one big long line. You will get something that is ugly as hell. Again, you will get something that is technically true, but not really valuable, right? And that's why you use the pre-tags here. So basically it comes back and it has this nice formatting to it, so it actually looks like something that's useful there. And then all you're going to do then is the normal shell underscore exec, and then you're going to feed it the command. So again, for each. So for each, every time it goes through, it's going to create this command with the URL in the array, and then here, this is where it's actually running the command, and then it's printing out, since it's echo, it's then printing out what the results are. We close the pre, we close the for each, we close the PHP, they close the body, we close the HTML, and then we have our nice little dashboard, and this is what we get here. So that's really all there is to this particular project. The big things here is, again, being able to use that auto refresh. Auto refresh on HTML pages, especially on dashboards, is just an incredibly good tool. Again, starting to think about using arrays instead of just individual variables. Instead of site 1 equals google.com and site 2 equals facebook.com and site 3 equals X, Y, or Z. By using an array, you can just add or subtract from that array much easier. And then, again, you just simply come down here and use that for each function to then step through all of the different values in the array. Instead of having to write 100 lines of code, I can write whatever this is, 6 or 7 lines of code, right? That's one of the reasons arrays are so valuable. Then we come down here to the array. We're going to use that shell underscore exec again. For the command is going to equal, again, ping space hyphen C space 1 space. Again, do remember that space. If you forget that space, it's going to fail out. It's going to be bad. And then you're just going to plug in the URL, which is basically the websites from the array. It's going to go through, and that is going to get you the results. So there you go. Now you know how to create a dashboard that dynamically updates itself, and your server can go out. It can ping local IP addresses to see if they are reachable from the server. Currently, it can also ping domain names and such up on the internet to give you an overview of what your server can actually see in a real-time situation. So again, this can be very valuable if your server is doing things such as doing online backups or if it's trying to connect to APIs or that type of thing. Knowing when those APIs for some reason are not accessible by your server, that can make your life easier because you can start troubleshooting the problem before your users start to complain. Remember, when the user calls you up with a problem, what you really want to say to that user is, oh, we already know there's an issue. We are already implementing a solution. We'll let you know when it's fixed, right? If a user gets that response, they will be much happier than if you're like, oh, well, it's down. I didn't know it's down. So creating a simple dashboard like this, can be a very useful tool in the real world. Obviously, with PHP, you can make a dashboard that is much more complicated, parses the returns values, does a lot more interesting things. But this is just a very basic dashboard that you could actually go and implement literally tomorrow or literally in about 30 minutes if you want to copy and paste the code. So I thought this was a useful project for you to take a look at. As always, I enjoyed doing this class and look forward to seeing you at the next one.